All right. We are live. Baker Fairburn Hockey Show, September 26, 2024. The chat is not informing me that they heard my belch on the way in, so I think that I got that out of my system right before the stream kicked in. I'm Kris Baker. I'm here with Matthew Fairburn, Sabres writer from The Athletic. Thanks, everyone, for hopping in here following the Sabres 3-2 preseason victory tonight up in Ottawa. We'll do a real brief recap of the Amerks victory. Michael Leone likely smiling 2-0 in his first games behind an NHL bench in the preseason. Good for him. You know, I had interest. Yeah, go ahead.
We were a little, we had this conversation at the end of the rookie tournament where I said, I don't know, 1-2 with such a first round pick heavy roster in the rookie tournament. Not great. Probably not how Mike Leone wanted to start his career behind the Sabres bench, but 2-0 in these two games with essentially the top 27 players in the organization over in Europe, continuing camp in Germany. A very young roster that Leone has taken on the road to Pittsburgh and Ottawa and gotten 2 wins. Preseason as it may be, that's, I think, a pretty gutty performance by this group of young players and, obviously some veteran AHLers in there as well.
No, good for him to get that win. Sabres out shooting Ottawa tonight, 41-16, with most of those shots fired on Linus Ullmark. Linus Ullmark had his welcome to the Ottawa Senators organization moment tonight, courtesy of the Amerks, just shelling him with some shots in the first, 30 minutes or so of play. But yes, Josh Dunn, Isak Rosén, and then a beautiful overtime winner from Noah Ostlund sealed the deal. So the Sabres improved to 4-0 in the preseason, and they'll be back in action. The big club will be in action tomorrow, 2:30 Eastern time, puck drop. And the Sabres will be playing Red Bull Munich, for those that aren't as cultured as I am. But at any rate, for everyone that's hopping in here, I got to get the formality out of the way. If you could please hit that like button, hit the notification bell so you know when Matthew and I go live here on YouTube. You can find the Baker Fairburn Hockey Show wherever you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, anywhere you get podcasts. We are everywhere worldwide. And if you could please leave a 5-star review, and I skipped part of that, like the video and subscribe to the channel. Subscriptions are up. It's a free subscription.
If you're listening on audio on Apple, go to the YouTube channel and subscribe. Join in on the chat. The chat is the place to be. If you're watching on YouTube, subscribe on Apple because those numbers help us too. It's a symbiotic relationship here between the two on the podcast, but the chat is already fired up. So if you're listening on audio the day after, you should have some FOMO because I already see our usual crew trickling in here with some commentary on the game.
That's right. But no, I'm not going to go too deep on the game tonight. I don't know if you have any thoughts, Matthew, before we get into, some of the other hotter topics with the Sabres organization. So news breaking today with the captaincy. We'll get into that and kind of put a bow on the discussion that you and I had about the captaincy last week and maybe develop that conversation a little bit more. But tonight, high level thoughts. Okay. I thought Noah Ostlund, even though he had the turnover, which I thought was a good defensive play on the Noah Gregor goal in the first period, I thought he's been really good from start to finish, going back to the first Prospects Challenge game. And then tonight, it's not just a 3-on-3 overtime winner. I just think that he looks really good, poised, really good with the puck. Novikov, I think, just looks, bigger guys always look slow. He's not a track star by any means, but he's going to play at some point down the road in the NHL. And I think when you look at those young defensemen, I think Ryan Johnson's still right there knocking on the door. Novikov's going to close that gap with Johnson. As far as the young guys go, Vsevolod Komarov to me is still a while away from the NHL, and that's okay. I've been looking at him coming out of juniors and saying, 2 years, see how he looks in the final year of his entry-level contract. He's got that raw skill. He's got that talent. Just want to see him sharpen things up a little bit. You know what I mean? Get a little more crisper with his execution, but a lot to like there with Komarov. But yeah, no, I thought that these prospects, I mean, Wahlberg's looking, like he's adjusting fine. He's a big guy. He's made for the 85-foot wide ice surface. I liked a lot the young guys tonight. I mean, I wanted to see them score more goals on Dustin Tokarski. I just, probably the ugliest goaltender still playing at a high level in North American professional hockey. Good to see them squeeze one there past him with Rosane in the final minute of regulation. But other than that, I mentioned Oslin, and I think that Hellenius, for an 18-year-old kid, he looks like, I know that I don't want to parrot what others have said. He looks like he played professional hockey, but he looks like he's played a lot of professional hockey. Very in control of his game. I don't mind him taking some hits. He's willing to take the hit to make a play, and he stays in plays, and he's on guys. So I think that they got a really good one there with Helena. It's going to be really fun watching him develop this year in Rochester and beyond. Matthew, I'm going to pass the puck over to you. Past couple of preseason games. We've seen the Amerks now for 2 games, basically. We get back to watching the big boys tomorrow over in Europe. Thoughts on what you're seeing and systems? I thought the power play, by the way, even when the Amerks guys are out there, much improved system power play. But go ahead. I don't want to steal all the thunder. I got to leave some meat on the bone for you, kid.
Novikov is definitely a standout for me going back to rookie camp. Just looking like he's making quicker decisions with the puck, doing everything a little bit quicker. And to your point, he's not super fast, but I don't have a problem with his skating necessarily. Like, I think he's going to be fine in that regard. That shot he scored on against the Penguins was great, but I just love how engaged he is competitively. That goes for when he played in scrimmages against, some NHL level talent throughout camp, and when he's been on the ice in these preseason games. He's just, I think, to your point, somebody that tracks to be an NHL player, right? Like, he's a guy that I think will fit in and be able to play NHL games at some point. Maybe not this season, because I don't see a clear path without quite a few injuries. They're deep on defense, but impressive player so far. Hellenius, same tonight. He's just been steady throughout camp and preseason. The only real hesitation I have with Hellenius is that he is taking a lot of hits, which I don't have a problem with, but he is not super big yet, right? He's willing to take the hits. He's able to take them, but over the course of an NHL season, you see why he needs some time to continue to get bigger and stronger. But love the competitiveness, and to your point, the poise with the puck on his stick, and being able to hold it an extra second to make a play. Definitely looks like the type of polished prospect they thought they were getting. And yeah, there's a reason people are excited about this prospect pool. You see it in games like the last couple. And now we'll see what I didn't have a ton of major takeaways from the NHL teams preseason games because the talent discrepancy was, those were tune-up games against AHL rosters. They should have blown them out. They did blow them out. You kind of, to your point, the power play has looked more active. They're getting a more net front presence, power play and 5-on-5.
I love the way they're using the middle of the ice on the power play.
Yeah, I think the way they're using the middle of the ice in general, the way the fourth line looks, forechecking and cycling and controlling play. Overall, maybe my big picture takeaway from camp, now that the team is in Germany and sort of the Buffalo portion of the camp has ended, is that there is a definite early buy-in, right? That these guys asked for something more, of a demanding training camp, harder practices, accountability, et cetera, et cetera. They got it from Lindy Ruff, and they are responding to it. They're bought into it. Easy to be bought in training camp. We'll see how that buy-in evolves over the highs and lows of an NHL season, but it has been a pretty strong start from these guys in that regard. And now it's a weird gap between seeing this team against, AHL level rosters in the preseason. We'll see them against a German team tomorrow. which I don't think, not even on an NHL rank, so not really a gauge of where they're at. And then a week from tomorrow, we'll see them in regular season action. So a bit of mystery here of how much this is going to translate to that game against the Devils, but pretty solid camp for the Sabres.
Yeah, before I forget, going back to my commentary about Dustin Tokarski being an ugly goaltender, which is indisputable. Brian Cummings puts a comment in here saying the guy's wearing a pink trucker hat just called another man ugly. First of all, Cummings, it's faded red, number one. Number two, if it was pink, Breast Cancer Awareness Month is coming up in a few short days. You wiener head. Okay, I had to get that out of my system. Cummings getting a little rowdy early on here, a little too early in the podcast for your lip, Cummings. Just wanted to get that out now. All right, so I'm ready to see the big boys back in action tomorrow and work their way up towards the regular season opener. But they had a little bit of business that they had to attend to that we knew was coming, and kind of goes back to, I think, what was it, 2011 when the Sabres announced Jason Pominville as captain. I think it was 2011, right? The NHL premiere that they had over in Helsinki, something like that. But the Sabres announcing their captain today, and no surprise, Rasmus Dahlin gets the captain C on his sweater jersey. But then kind of an interesting move, because I think all four names that you and I kind of volleyed back and forth on the last podcast that you and I did were named alternates. And it's kind of funny. We didn't get to this point on the podcast, but you and I talked about this thing on the phone yesterday about having 4 A's that would be rotated. And sure enough, that's what Lindy Ruff elected to do with his squad this year, the leadership group. So with Dahlin will be Alex Tuck, Tage Thompson, Dylan Cousins, and Matthias Samuelsson. We know where each other stand on each of those guys in terms of their worthiness. I think those are all 4 good choices to wear A's, and it'll be a rotation, it sounds like. I think we have to learn more about what that rotation might look like. I have ideas for what the rotation might look like. You might have ideas in mind, but overall, are you surprised that they went there? I'm not at all. I'm kind of surprised that like Lindy would maybe go 4, but I'm not at the same time, because we've seen him do this before, especially since he had a pretty good pool of guys to choose from. And he just said, screw it, I'm going to give you guys all letters.
Yeah, it's not a total stunner, right? We have seen him do it before. We talked a little bit about the possibility, and I was a little bit surprised that they went that direction, but I think as training camp went on, this possibility became, more real, because when Lindy Ruff would bring up leadership, or when it was asked about the leadership group, he brought up those names. And during the preseason games, they had 3 A's when they easily could have had 2, right? Easily could have done Tuck and Thompson and sent the signal that those were the guys. But when Cousins got one, I thought, okay, Lindy Ruff sees something there. And he kept bringing up Samuelsson too as one of those leaders. And he's definitely, I think what you're seeing with this group of A's, before it was Kyle Okposo, Zemgus Girgensons, and Rasmus Dahlin. And Rasmus Dahlin was the leader of his peer group. This is such a young, or especially last year, was such a young team. He was the only one that was really in his peer group, like leading his peers. The other guys, Girgensons is what, 30, 31, somewhere in there. Okposo turned 36 last season. So those guys were not necessarily leading their own peers. And I think that's what I like about this group of A's. You have Cousins, Dahlin, and Samuelsson, who are unquestionably the leaders of that young core. And then you have the slightly older guys in Tuck and Thompson, more established, the veterans, Tuck being really the elder statesman among the lettermen here. But I think it gives them a nice mix of, and it takes some of the burden off of Rasmus Dahlin too, that there's a group around him to step in and lead. at different moments. I think it's something that's going to take Rasmus Dahlin some getting used to, getting in guys' faces consistently, being that guy, being the guy that stands up and talks all the time, especially after losses. Not something Rasmus Dahlin loves to do. Sometimes he would not want to do it. And, because he is so competitive, does get so, angry when they lose. But this gives a nice mix of players that can make it so Rasmus Dahlin doesn't feel like he's doing this all himself, like he's putting the weight of the franchise on himself. We have seen that fail other arguably two young captains in the past, or maybe one in particular being Jack Eichel, that the lack of support around him is what really doomed him. And I think they don't want to repeat that mistake because Rasmus Dahlin is still a pretty young man at 23 years old. So having some extra support isn't a bad idea.
No, I agree. I mean, we talked a little bit about it at the end of last year. I think that the team was devoid of leadership. It's pretty clear that Dahlin has just emerged. Personally, he's shown that growth. Forget about his effectiveness as a player. I just think as a human being, he's definitely matured. I think he's ready. The time is right for him to wear that C, lead by example. If things go well, there's more guys there to help him, to your point, not just guys that are wearing the A's. I think there's, they added some teeth to their lineup that are going to drag others into the fight. And maybe Dahlin doesn't have to get in guys' faces. That shouldn't be the first thing that you think about with a captain. It's more about leading with your play on the ice, and you know what I mean?
He is that guy. He's the guy that is absolutely leads with his play on the ice and prefers to do it that way. But he's also, he bought himself a nice big house when he got that contract, and he's been generous about sharing it with the team for team parties. He housed Zach Benson last year. He did this camp over the summer. Like, those are actions, but that's more than leading with your play, right? That's leading with your actions off the ice, and I think that's what they need. What I think is interesting when I was looking at their list of all-time captains, Dahlin joins now. The most recent ones is what stuck out to me. You have Kyle Okposo, who was really about a season and a half, and deserving of the letter when he got it, no question. A fine, absolutely, fine leader for this team, and an important part of getting them from Ralph Kruger to Don Granato and to where they got to. But a captain who, justified or not, asked to be traded, right? And in the final year of his contract to chase a Stanley Cup, he got the Stanley Cup, the storybook ending, all of that. I do not fault him whatsoever. But a captain that asked to be traded. Before that, it was Jack Eichel for 3 seasons. He also had a very messy exit. I mean, I shouldn't say also had a very messy exit. Also asked to be traded in a much messier way, obviously, than Kyle Okposo did. Before that, they did not have a captain for a season, and it was a few seasons of Brian Giunta. And you had Steve Ott. You had Thomas Vanek for a little while in 2013. So, point being, it's been a while since they had stability at the captain spot, like a real leader on the ice in the organization for an extended period of time. I mean, there's a long list of captains here in the early 2000s. Lindy did like to move the letter around a lot, which doesn't mean they were lacking leadership. But in the last handful of years, you talk about the drought specifically, leadership is part of what's been lacking. And so maybe this is potentially a new era of leadership for this group. We'll see.
Even going back to when Pominville was given, like, you started that long list of captains with Okposo. He was always just a captain by default.
And a placeholder, right?
A placeholder. That's the word. A placeholder captain by default. But yeah, to your point, but even like Pominville in 2011, was never really a guy, especially at that point in his career, that really stood out as like a captain, like a true gritty heart and soul leader. He was always a good player, but he never really. I don't know, man. Like I think that they're onto something here with Darlene. I think they're onto something with the young guys that they put around him in that leadership group. So I kind of like it, and they have stability there. Even before, but you go back to Pominville, I think they had 4 A's with him, right? That was Stafford, Vanek, Gostad, and Derek Roy. I think Roy was one of them. That group right there, and this group feels totally different. So I like where they're going. I think that these young guys, I think it's set up really well. So with 4 A's though, and it being deemed a rotation, I'm in terms of stability with captaincy, like home and road. I kind of like the idea of having your set of road A's and home A's. I don't know if it's going to play out that way. How do you think it's going to go? And if so, does it matter even? It might not even matter. But I kind of have an idea of how I would structure it, just for for structure, and how I would use those A's home and away.
I'm not sure how it's going to go. I am not positive that it matters, but I do like the idea of a little bit of predictability, stability, consistency with it, just for one less thing to think about. I feel like if you're Lindy Ruff, right? You don't want to be. It's like, okay, you're predetermining the decision right now on the road. These guys have it. Probably saves you a little bit of money, right? You don't have to keep moving the A around. Saves you some stitching. Um, going back and forth. Saves the equipment guys some time. But
Yarn's getting expensive. Yeah.
I just think it would just be easier to, you could have injuries that make you switch it up, but I think it would be easier to do what you're saying, have 2 on the road, 2 at home. I think we actually disagree on who should be each one. So you go ahead and share your idea for how you would put
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. At home, I'm going with obviously my captain is my number 1 defenseman, and my 2 A's are my guys down the middle. So Thompson and Cousins would get home A's. And on the road, I'm leaning into Tuck's veteran leadership on the road with Samuelson as a road A. That's what I would do. And it's more about putting Tuck as the road guy and trying to create that accountability on the road, where actually the team has actually played better past couple of years. But I think it matters. I do think it matters a little bit, like the tempo that you set home and road. And I know that you're different. I think that you're looking at maybe flipping Tuck as a
The
home
only
A.
one I feel somewhat strongly about, and I don't mind him being a road A, because he is sort of the ringleader on the road a little bit for these guys, getting guys together, and you know, um, he's the veteran pulling together some dinners and whatnot. But he feels like the people's choice for an A, doesn't he? Like I feel like since I've been on the beat, people have been asking me, when are they going to make Tuck the captain? And obviously he's not the captain, but he is the fan favorite in a lot of ways, and I think he takes a lot of pride in. He was one of the first guys to take from outside to take pride in playing in Buffalo publicly and really own it. And we have talked about, you know, corny as it may be, like the fan base is part of this. Like repairing that relationship makes you a better hockey team, I think. Every little gesture you can make. And that's where like the goodwill of hiring back Lindy Ruff, or the good karma, whatever you want to call it, like having Lindy Ruff calling people up, like that little stuff. I think if it energizes the building, it actually might matter from a hockey standpoint. And will people be more fired up because Tuck has the A at home? I don't think so. But him knowing, he's part of why they haven't played well at home, right? And
Mm-hmm.
him owning that and him feeling that every night when he puts that jersey on at home, I think is important. The other ones I don't really care about. There's just a lot baked into Tuck. It's not really his fault. It's just people put a lot of their Jack Eichel energy into Tuck, and Tuck sort of embraced Buffalo and loved this team growing up. And so I kind of want him to have the letter when he walks onto that home ice every night, because I do think that is more I will go as far as to say, you're talking about leadership on the road, right? When you want your veterans on the road, I'll go as far as to say I want way more leadership at home from this team. Way more. Like
Yeah, that's
a
why I had
lot.
Dylan Cousins wearing
Like,
an A at home, because he's the most natural leader of those A's.
yeah, I mean, he is a tone setter. There's no doubt about it. And I think Lindy Ruff sees him the exact same way. I think, you know, again, we're probably splitting hairs, right? As to all
I
the
think so.
you don't need
Yeah.
a letter to lead and all those things. But yeah, the leadership is sorely lacking at home. And I think, the hope would be that it's not as if these are new guys, right? They're not. You could almost say the leadership is going to come from Malenstein, Obey Kubel, and Lafferty.
If
But
yeah, if Cousins plays the way that we know that he can play, I want my team being a reflection of Dylan Cousins on home ice, more so than Alex Tuck. And it's not a knock on Tuck's game at all. There's fire with Cousins. I like the hard driving nature of his game. I think that he's going to have a big season. I do. But yeah, we are splitting hairs, and I'm not looking at the chat. They're probably sick and tired of this already, honestly, or maybe they're not. I don't know. We'll see. But I just thought that was worth getting into a little bit more. We had a pretty healthy discussion on those names last week, and actually the 4 guys that we spent the most time on ended up getting A's. I thought it was kind of justice for the discussion that we had. So we talked about some guys there at the top of the lineup. We talked about some captains. Now I think we kind of grind into the battles. I think there's still a couple battles in camp, or maybe really one at this point, with the forwards. And you and I talked about maybe kind of building from the bottom up, right? With you have your Malenstein, Lafferty, Obey Kubel. We like it. We're good there. Let's skip the third line for a second. Let's go to the second line. Benson, Cousins, Quinn. Looks good, right? Looks good on the ice. Looks good on paper. That was the line that I know I personally wanted to see them open camp with. I'm glad to see it there. I'm not disrupting that. And of course, Peterka, who looks like he could have a pretty big year with Thompson and Tuck. So you have this third line. And I think that Zucker and McLeod, like watching McLeod skate, by the way. I texted it the other night. He skates just like his brother, like effortless. I love it. Love it. I think he's going to add just a lot of juice down the middle of the ice, speed-wise. But you have Zucker and McLeod. I think they're the mainstays there. And then you have this Jordan Greenway situation where I think that he's kind of penciled in right now as the guy. But are you starting to wonder if Peyton Krebs is going to fit anywhere, that's the spot that he can compete with, or compete for, I should say? Is that the only spot that we see Krebs really battling for?
I don't see a battle right now. I don't think, because I could see it eventually. Put it that way. I could see if they want to make a change at some point, that's where you make a change. And a lot of that could depend on, how the other lines look. If somebody looks out of place, if somebody gets hurt, that could very well happen when the regular season starts. These lines that look good on paper could not be working, and one shuffle causes you to shuffle a few different things. I don't know that we'll see Lindy be impulsive with his lines. I think he'll stick with them. And that's where a subtle change, like swapping out Greenway, could be a possibility at some point. If Krebs has a spot to fight for, that's probably the one. I just don't see it as an opening day battle anymore. Peyton Krebs got a chance to play on the wing when Alex Tuck had the night off on Monday against the Blue Jackets. He scored. He got a great setup from Tage Thompson, fired the puck, by the goalie, took advantage of the open look. Shot looked pretty good. I thought. I think he's got a little bit more pop on the shot. I think
Mhm.
he's more willing to shoot so far in camp in the preseason than we've seen. Still the same, feisty work ethic, but he seemed a little surprised, maybe is the word, that he was playing on the wing. He kind of has always viewed himself as a center, views himself as a center. I think he's got to start to get used to the idea of the wing, though. And after the game, given sort of an opportunity, I would say, to, you know, gas Krebs up a little bit, Lindy Ruff mostly just said that was because he didn't want to disturb the other lines. That's why Krebs was playing up where he was playing. So it wasn't as if this was some sort of audition for what he could do in the top six or anything like that.
I
But
didn't
if
think
you
it was. Yeah.
but
Yeah.
if you want more offense on your third line, I think Krebs probably his playing style probably matches with the other two, maybe a little bit better. He can play with a little bit more pace than Greenway can, but for what you want that line to be, I think Greenway can hold his own there. He is a weird fit because he's not nearly as fast, right? And Zucker can skate, McLeod can obviously skate. He's one of the fastest players in the NHL, but Greenway is not that guy. He's going to be the last man in on the forecheck probably quite a bit because of that, but he's still a solid defensive player. And he's still going to help that line limit chances against and play a responsible game. I just don't think if Lindy Ruff were hand picking that this offseason, that he would hand pick a player like Greenway necessarily. But you also have to work with what you have. You can only make so many changes, and they changed out 5 forwards in that group from a season
Yeah.
ago. So they did make a lot of changes. Greenway's on the last year of his contract. But that is a spot. And look, you talk about accountability, non-negotiables, these buzzwords. Greenway ran into some trouble with that in Minnesota. He was late for a meeting at one point and got benched. And that was part of why he started to fall out of favor with the Wild and why they were willing to trade him. So it's probably all of that baked into that, making that the spot to watch too, because if you wanted to get Kulik into the lineup, that could be a spot to do it. I've always thought that, I know he's more of a top 6 stylistic fit, but to me, the more sensible spot in the lineup was Greenway's. And you could either bump Greenway down if you have to, or if you like that fourth line as it is, you bump Greenway out. There's maybe a possibility that you could trade Greenway if it came to that, but this is all falls in the category of much better conversation to have than ones you were having 12 months ago, wondering, boy, is Victor Olofsson going to replace Jack Quinn, or how's this going to? Didn't have enough forwards basically to fill out a 12-man lineup card at times. Now you have 13 who you could previously would have just penciled in. Krebs you would have just penciled in. That's 13. And 14 and 15 are Kulik and Rusek, who both, I think, can play NHL games this season if they need to. So a much deeper forward group than they had last season. And that on its own will create this accountability that they want. It's competition. And Krebs is hungry. So yeah, if Greenway's game slips, or someone else for that matter, I think he's waiting to take a spot.
Yeah. Last year, on a team with a coach that really wanted him here and liked him and had familiarity with him, I questioned early on, especially in the season, where does Jordan Greenway fit on this roster? And through time, it became clear where he fit, like he's middle line, but like there were times that he was overused because they lacked bodies and they just had to push him up the lineup. And I think that the reason that I think it's worth talking about, like we are right now with Krebs maybe pushing that spot, is he is a good defensive forward, Greenway. He doesn't have the pace, and his physicality has been inconsistent throughout his career. Even last year, skating past guys that he should have finished his hits. And I still think if Lindy sees him do that again this year where he's inconsistent, Krebs is going to get a spot, or not a spot full time, but he's going to maybe get a look there. I just think because of the pace. And part of me in the back of my mind says Peyton Krebs isn't done. He's better than he's shown, I think. And I know fans want to beat him up because fans have beaten up every young player that's played for the Sabres at some point in their career. Sam Reinhart was a bust. People wanted to trade Rasmus Dahlin. People were all up Casey Middlestad's ass for 3 years. Peyton Krebs is the next in line of those guys as the whipping boy. Peyton Krebs is set up, I think, to overachieve expectations this year. And I think the way that he could do it is once Greenway slips into some of those inconsistencies with his habits. It's not a prediction. I just think that he's on watch. And I said early in the offseason when they went and got Lafferty and Malenstein and Obey Kubel, Peyton Krebs is on watch. Yeah, because he was in there in the fourth line role. But now I'm still kind of wondering where Greenway fits. I want Greenway to fit there. I want Greenway to play up to his full potential because he's a hell of an asset on that line with Zucker and McLeod, just given his experience, given his familiarity with the league. So I don't know. We'll see. Something in the back of my mind, though, says Peyton Krebs isn't done.
We had a good Steve 13th Legion made me laugh with this comment. Said Krebs could come out on the ice with his skate guards on and overachieve my expectations. So
Yeah,
I guess
and I
you're right.
love
I mean,
Steve
that's
13th Legion,
that-
but that's
that's pretty
exactly
low
the stuff that I'm talking about, though, with the
that's
fans.
pretty low expectations.
That's exactly what I'm talking about, though.
That would be I just the image of somebody coming onto the ice in their skate guards makes me laugh every
Here's
time.
the other thing. Yeah. Oh, I know. I love that. Here's the thing with Krebs, though, too. The way that they used him last year, especially, it forced him to become a better defensive player. That's going to lend value if he does get a look in that role on the third. That responsibility in having less of responsibility when he's playing the wing. So it's no different than kind of how they've developed Kulik, if you think about it in Rochester, forcing him to get better and tighten the screws on his defensive game off the puck by putting him down the middle in Rochester. So I don't know. I'm not, it's not a prediction. I'm just saying that is the logical place where he does fit if he's going to get playing time. And because I'm still questioning the Greenway thing, I'm still trying to figure it out. And we've only seen him one game. So it's not fair to pile on Greenway, and I'm not doing it. I'm just being, I think, realistic because we've seen Greenway leave you wanting more.
Yeah. Fair. And I think the biggest thing Lindy Ruff is going to have, really the only thing you have as a coach when it comes to accountability, and I already feel like I've said that word too many times for one podcast. I'm
Okay.
sick of that
Say
word.
it again. Say it as many times as you need to.
It's the only real vehicle you have for that is ice time, right? And playing time and taking it away. And I think we saw Don Granato run into some problems last year where he was running out of options when it came to taking away ice time. And Lindy Ruff should not have as much of a problem with that because I really see 3 forwards who could come in and play games. Like, I really think you could put Krebs in Greenway spot, and that's fine. I think you could put Kulik in that spot, and I think you could get by. I don't know how long or if that would be a perfect spot for him, but I see a more confident player away from the puck. I see a more engaged player competitively, and a guy that has a sense of objective out there on the ice, which I like. So I think you could put him there, and Rusek too. I think we've seen in that fourth, third line role in spurts. You probably don't want him being an every night guy, but if you need to send a message for a couple of nights, I think you could do it. So that's a much different situation than they were in before. And I think it's a good point by you to bring up Greenway, just because we have seen in the past the consistency come and go with all those little things. And the Sabres were open about the fact that he was a guy that Granato advocated for, right? Granato wanted Greenway in the trade. And so that's, he's not I look at that fourth line and I see three guys that were handpicked by Lindy Ruff is what I see. And I see three guys that play their asses off and are going to do all those little things. I see three guys. Maybe my favorite thing about them is three guys who have earned everything they've gotten in their careers. Something that I think, these are guys that weren't high draft picks. I think Lafferty was a 4-year college player.
Mhm.
These are guys that really had to work at it, to carve out a role and embrace a role, and didn't have to be told to play that role, right? This is just how they play. These are just guys that like to skate fast and hit people. And I don't think those guys are going to be easy guys to bump out of the lineup. I think they're going to be the ones that kind of, like you said, you build the lineup from the bottom up. Like, these are guys that are going to be hard to move out of spots if you're Peyton Krebs. And so that's where I think the target becomes Greenway. And look, the more Lindy Ruff talks about Zach Benson, the more it's clear he's going to feel similarly to Granato, that this is a guy that is also hard to take out of the lineup. Will a 19-year-old need a few nights off? Maybe, but I don't know. He didn't need that many last year. So you're running out of spots to see logical places for Krebs to fill in unless there's an injury. And so, yeah, if there's somebody on watch, it would be Greenway.
Maybe they'll send Benson to World Juniors. That'll be his break. Could you imagine that? He would just absolutely shred it. Absolutely shred it. Canada might need him this year, by the way. I know we got some Canadian fans in here, but too early to fan the flames on the USA-Canada World Junior rivalry. Got a couple months, but I'll be ready to go. I like the American squad this year. So I think, shifting gears. We're already almost 45 minutes in. I've been up since 3:30 in the morning, by the way. So I'm ready for bed, but we're going to go. Obviously, we'll probably be here for an hour and a half again. I threw together.
What were you doing up at 3:30 in the morning?
I got, my mind was on some stuff that I had to take care of. So I was laying in bed, firing off emails, angry emails, and I was just not in a good mood. But it helped me actually. My work day got a little smoother because I took care of some heavy lifting at 3:40. I was looking at some timestamps. None that I regretted sending. But like when you're thinking of something, you have like an important message that you need to send and you're looking for the right way to frame it. If it comes at you when you wake up at 3:30 in the morning when you're up taking a piss, you're going to grab your phone, you're going to send an email. And that's exactly how it went down. Then I had to send a couple other ones, some follow-ups. Hey, just an FYI, this email went out. And then I didn't go back to bed. But yeah, I wasn't watching Pro Corporal Top Off. So
you've been known to do that before at 3:30 in the morning.
I was up the other day watching him at 5 a.m. But so I threw together, I like doing this, just fun. Let's have some fun, and I threw together some just kind of like predictions, like everyone does bold predictions. I like to do them like fun, but not too fun. I don't even think they're super, super compelling. But can I review some of them with you?
That's 4. A good sell. That's a great sell.
Yeah, I don't care.
Not compelling.
They're not super compelling. I don't want to oversell it. Maybe they are compelling. Maybe I'm
compelled. I didn't look at these beforehand. So
don't. You're not allowed.
I'm going to be.
You didn't put anything in the show sheet.
Just
actually.
Like
yeah.
So I did put a few notes in there, but no predictions. Yeah.
So we no, you didn't. There's nothing in there. So
I updated the defensive pairs for us, and I put something else in there. But give
Oh,
us your
thank you for that.
predictions.
Yeah. Oh, and hit the like button, everyone, by the way, as I get ready for my uncompelling my 4-pack of bold predictions for this year. So let me start off a couple things, just again, not compelling. This one is definitely not super compelling, but I think that Matthias Samuelsson is going to play in more games than Alex Tuck this year. I think Samuelson's going to play in 70 plus games this year. First time in his career, he's going to hit the 70 game mark. Even his first year, I think that he split between Rochester and Buffalo. I think he only played 60 something. He's going to play 70 plus professional games this year. He's going to be healthy. And he's going to have more games than Tuck. Okay. So my second prediction is kind of related to Tuck. So after scoring 7 goals in his first 5 AHL games, Yuri Kulik's going to get recalled to Buffalo on October 26th. He's going to replace an injured Alex Tuck. They're going to put him on the Thompson line, and he's going to have 2 goals in his season debut with the Sabres this year. Saturday afternoon matinee against Detroit. So mark it down in your calendars now. And I want every chatter that's in here tonight to send me $100 American in unmarked bills when it happens. October 26th, 2 goals. Tuck out of the lineup, Kulik in. And kind of the point about not disrupting the lines, that's why they're going to put Kulik up there. Not Krebs, because Krebs is already going to be in for Greenway. That's not one of the 4 predictions, though. Jack Quinn, I think, stays healthy this year. Okay. He's going to play 80 games. He's going to have 29 goals. His quest for 30 is going to get derailed because he's going to get a 2-game suspension in the final week of the regular season. I have a game against Florida on April 12th. I see Sam Bennett. I see Quinn charging Sam Bennett. High hit, 2-game suspension.
Quinn getting suspended would be, I think that's the boldest of your predictions.
2-game suspension. 2-game suspension.
With a high hit or a high stick? A high stick, I could see.
It's going to be a charging penalty. High hit. These are finite. These are detailed.
Very specific.
Okay. You got your work cut out for you. Lastly, okay, Devin Levi is going to go into Toronto December 15th. And he's going to make 39 saves for his first shutout in the NHL. 4-0 victory. The Sabres are going to win 4-0 in Toronto. It's a 5:00 start. And no one's going to see it because the Bills play a 4:25 kickoff in Detroit that day.
I didn't realize that those overlapped. I did know about that 5:00 start in Toronto. I wonder what that's going to do to ticket prices. Is that a home game against Detroit?
No.
Oh, it's in Detroit.
No. The Bills are in Detroit.
Okay.
4:25 kickoff, and the Sabres are in Toronto. 5:00 face-off. Those were some. I have others, but I'm saving them to trade off when you if you write some bold predictions. I know you did some last year.
I will be writing some. That is something they want from us for next week. And so I'm still formulating. Mine will not be nearly as specific, but you've now inspired me to get more specific. Really visualize the predictions, because when you get specific like that, you can really drill down. The Tuck Samuelsson one to me is not far-fetched. I don't know. I struggle with games played predictions because I feel like it's guesswork, right? But I do think that's an important point in your prediction, is that Samuelsson has been banged up, but he's had some bad luck. And I think he's still been learning how to probably not put himself in super vulnerable positions, but I think in a lesser role, not playing those Dahlin minutes at even strength, I think could help him. Right now, it looks like it's going to be Dahlin, Jokiharju, Byram, Power, Samuelsson, Clifton as the defense pairs. So I do think a role like that helps Samuelsson stay healthy. I do also worry generally about Alex Tuck's body, just the wear and tear. I think he breaks down over the course of a season, and we've seen it the last couple of years. He had one kind of freaky injury with the foot when he blocked a shot, but he's no stranger to bad injury luck either. So that's not a far-fetched prediction. I
That
like
prediction,
Samuelson
though, is tough,
optimism,
though,
though.
by the way, right? Because that's like early in the season, though, that you already have Tuck coming out of the lineup. We're talking October, like the end of October, like basically a month from today. If that prediction, if the crystal ball that I used, because I do have a crystal ball, and I did use it to put these together, believe it or not, with my faded red hat, Cummings. Was that's an early part that's concerning. Kind of that's where it throws some things into flux. But sorry, go ahead. But it's also Kulik. It's forecasting Kulik to have this crazy hot start in Rochester, like he did last year.
And he should be ready for that. I think he'll be eager to play games. I don't know. He'll be coming back from overseas, and there'll be that part of everything. But I think he's going to be eager to play in some games. He's going to be hungry after a good NHL camp. We already saw the way he scored in the rookie tournament. So also Tuck missing a game or missing a couple of games isn't, that even that early in the season isn't far-fetched. We saw that last year. A healthy Alex Tuck makes this a much better hockey team, but I think the point you're making here is that it's not easy to count on a healthy Alex Tuck all the time. Even when he is playing, he's often not playing at 100%. So that's why I think he got the night off on Monday. I think that's why they just, not because he's dealing with anything, just because the maintenance, the wear and tear, the speed he plays at when he is playing, and the size, right? The history of being pretty beat up. That's something to monitor this season.
Part of and there was thought put into it. I wasn't just throwing darts. Okay. The October 26th game is that Hockey Halloween game. That's the first black and red third jersey game for the Sabres. Tage likes those jerseys. I have Kulik playing with Tage, and they're playing Detroit, who Thompson owns. Kulik can be the beneficiary of that. There was some thought, some scenarios reviewed in my mind. It was just a bunch of bullshit being typed up.
These are pretty compelling. I think you've undersold them.
If I made people go to the calendar and mark stuff down so they can come back to this chat and this podcast and tell me how wrong I was, great. But I do want $100 when Kulik does get those 2 goals from everyone. How many people we got in the chat? That's like almost 10 grand.
That's pretty good.
And then, the Devin Levi one, by the way, that's my birthday, December 15th. But Levi has gone into Toronto in the past and had good games.
That's true.
And that is
a
back-to-back.
He likes big games. He likes, that the crazy atmospheres. He tends to play well in those types of situations. And you're right. Probably nobody will see it if the Bills are on it, unless the Sabres have started like on some torrid pace to start the season. Maybe people will put 2 screens up in their basements. The chatters will see it, but the rest of the Lions, that's a pretty juicy matchup for the Bills.
Yeah,
that's a good one. 425 too. That's a nice.
And it's a
nice
back-to-back. The Sabres are on the road the day before in Washington, then I got to travel up to Toronto. So reasonable to think that Levi, at the very least, could play that game.
If it were a 1:00 Bills game in Detroit and like a 7:00 hockey game, you could conceivably get to both almost. How long does it take to get from Detroit to Toronto? Probably not. You'd be cutting it close.
Yeah.
You probably need an 8:00 start to make it happen.
Someone double check me on that start time, but I'm pretty sure it's
no, it is I know the hockey game's a 5:00 start. So
yeah, I think the Bills are 425. But yeah, so there you go.
Those were my goals.
29 goals. I want him to get to 30. I think that because my original prediction, full disclosure, not to step on you, but like I'll pass it back to you. My original prediction was that Quinn was going to outscore Peterka. That was the original prediction. It was kind of like the whole games played thing with Samuelson and Tuck. But I just think JJ, if he sticks up there with Thompson, Thompson has a good year. It's going to be really hard, and frankly, Quinn being on that first power play unit with Paterka again makes it kind of hard, right? But I think that's going to really benefit Quinn. So the forecast is that he stays healthy and he scores basically at the same goals per game clip that he had last year. I think that we mentioned it. I think it was last time we were together. Like if both of those guys can be 30-30, it's not unreasonable.
It's not. It's almost what they've been banking
Mm-hmm.
this whole thing on, right? Not adding a top 6 forward, and the last couple years, right? They've been banking on these two guys. And the whole not spending to the cap this year and planning for your future spending, you are looking at I mean, I think the number starts at 7 with Paterka, right? On a long-term extension if he
Mm-hmm.
continues to play the way that he does. And Quinn probably starts at 6. But Dylan Guenther getting 7.1 really throws a wrench into the equation for the Sabres because you know that Paterka and Quinn are looking at that and thinking, I mean, Dylan Guenther could have a great year, but he signed that contract based on 135-point season and a heck of a lot of potential. But Paterka and Quinn have put together some decent work in the NHL and have quite a bit of potential themselves. So that is a best case scenario though for the Sabres is that if you get a combined 60 goals out of Quinn and
Mm-hmm.
Paterka, unless a lot of other stuff goes wrong, I think you're a contender for the playoffs at the end of the year.
I was on in August with Duffer, helping them fill some of that summertime when Marty was doing something and kind of, Duffer threw that question. He's like, who's the one
Typical
guy?
Marty
Typical
doing stuff.
Marty. I know.
The nerve.
I know. Been here 25 years and still has the accent. Luke Robitaille figured out how to not get, he got rid of the
I
accent. Marty can't.
don't
But anyways,
want Marty to ever not
I
have
know.
the
I'm
accent.
just busting his
He
chops.
wouldn't be
I'm just
Marty
busting-
without the accent.
I'm just busting his chops. I'm busting his chops. Duffer asked me, he's like, who's the key to making this whole thing? And like the answer was Quinn. I think Duffer said like Owen Power was the key and totally a good choice. Mine was Quinn. If Quinn's healthy with the rate stats that he put up last year, he really unlocks the offense and kind of what you and I talked about when he came back. When you came back from leave, that's when Quinn came back skating last year. And I remember mentioning to you that I just felt that the team looked different. You've heard me say that on this podcast before when Quinn was out there and active and just his compete level in a year that you were just dying to see the Sabres compete. I thought he raised the water level when he was out there. He stays healthy. I think that he changes the whole thing this year.
The guy I have been in my head thinking is the pivot point in a way, the one who can change everything if things go well is Dylan Cousins.
Mm-hmm.
He's been my all summer just wondering like, man, if he can be what he's supposed to be and not what he was last year. And I'm not even necessarily talking about the goals. Be great if the goals came back. I don't know that they're going to come all the way back to where they were 2 years ago because he's not going to have that, at least right now, doesn't look like he'll have that number one power play, type of time. But even if the goals don't come all the way back, being that, tone setter that we talked about, that I didn't feel he was often enough last year, being reliable and steady defensively, which I didn't always feel like he was last year. If he can just be that, like, I think the letter, we had a question in the chat, like, will having the C make Dahlin a better player? I think having the A really could make Dylan Cousins a better player. I think it means a lot to him to have that. I think he's wanted that since he got to Buffalo.
I agree.
And I think he was sort of trying to act that way at times without it. At times last year, he had the GM contradicting some things that he said. But what turned out that Dylan Cousins was right all along. When he was all the stuff he said, in November about the team playing soft and not having enough pushback, turned out to be the same thing everybody was saying at locker cleanout. So I just think he needs to he needs to be a 60-plus point guy, and he needs to be able to be the defensive presence that we've heard a lot about from a lot of different coaches that talk about him, GMs, that the potential they talk about is that this is a guy that is your two-way. People bring up Pekka, people bring up. I think if he can be that it's not just the key to this season, it's the key to the whole rebuild kind of working, because he's your number 2 center. He's locked up for $7 million a year. Like, he absolutely needs to play like it. And I say Dylan Cousins because I think with Dylan Cousins playing that way, Jack Quinn gets 25 plus goals. And, certainly there's many keys to it working, right? As we saw last year, if you had said, well, gee, if JJ Peterka scores almost 30 goals, they probably had a good year. Well, it turns out nobody else did what they were supposed to do. So that was just one guy having a good year. So it takes a lot of different things, but it just feels like Cousins, when he goes, a lot of other guys go, especially obviously his line mates, but he can be a guy that lifts the team in a lot of ways. So he's one I'm curious about, stay healthy, take that next step. He showed up to camp much bigger, stronger. So no, Lindy Ruff loves him. We'll see what happens, but interesting guy to watch for me this year. Probably somebody I'll make some sort of bold prediction about.
I land on Quinn too, just to kind of put a bow on my thoughts on that. Is like, I'm taking Cousins bounce back just totally for granted, totally expecting it. Like, last year was a blip, and right or wrong, that's how I feel about his game. That's it. And I do think, though, that Quinn is just something about that shot, something about his, you know what I mean? Like, what do you have? What did he play last year? He played
27 games.
27 games. And
he
had
the 5th most points per 60 of anybody in the league that played 20 or more games.
What do you have? 9 goals? I don't have it up. 9 was it?
9 goals, 10 assists in 27 games.
0.33 goals per game. Is that right? Is it 0.3? My maths. I shouldn't be doing this math on the fly. But
you've been up since 3:30 in the morning.
At any rate, if he stays healthy and he maintains like a slight uptick on that, he could get 30. It's gonna be hard. He's got to really just hammer the power play. He's got to really take advantage of his power play time. But yeah, love to see it. Probably over ambitious, but they're fun predictions, and there you go. So those are my 4. And I will have more. I had a 5th. I'm not ready to go there yet because I think it's just going to cause some shit. I don't want to do that.
I'll have some next week ready in written form. And so whenever we go, whether it's before or after that publishes, I'll have some ready. I did great 2 years ago when I did bold predictions. I did horrible last year. Like, really bad. I was way off the mark. I would pull them up. Maybe I'll do that next week. I'll have them at the ready. I missed the mark on quite a few of those.
We're an hour in. This is usually the time that we like to dive into what the chat is talking about. And I haven't been looking. So do you have anything? I know I saw some early chats where some of the chatters tonight liked Jack Rathbone, who's going to be a very good defenseman for the Amerks this year. He was really good tonight. Really good with the puck. His placement of passes, which is such an underrated thing. Like, my pet peeve is like when guys do not pass the puck well, like passing it in skates or not hitting a guy's breadbasket. His passes were really good, placed perfectly tonight. He was a player that I remember he played at Dexter, I think, in New England Prep. I remember writing about him in the draft preview 2017. So kind of a longtime favorite. It was nice to see the Sabres pick him up for org depth this year. But yeah, it's nice to see the chat acknowledging his game tonight. You had a little smirk on your face. You found something. Throw it up.
Steven Cantor had this prediction about my personal life that will that would I think would be too much to handle. He says bold prediction: Matthew Fairburn and his spouse will be expecting another baby. We already have 2. That would be 3 under 4, and I think it's safe to say that one's not going to hit. But you never know. You can't always plan these things, but
I
not in the
support
cards.
whatever you got to do.
Not,
I
not in the
support
cards.
whatever you got to do.
Not in the
You know?
cards.
All right.
I think we were talking about Owen Power, and Michael Pakla brings up, are we looking at a possible Owen Power breakout season? He's got 2 goals in 2 preseason games. The shot looks a little better. He's put on a little bit of muscle from talking to him, so he says. He didn't necessarily need, I don't think, to put on a bunch of weight, but I don't know what to. You said Duffer had him as sort of the key, the pivot point, and I like that pick because he is such a mystery to me in terms of how quickly he can get to where we think he can be. I think he has a ton of potential to really fill up the score sheet with points. And he only gets second power play minutes, so that definitely limits him, but he is really just, the more you watch him and the longer he plays in the offensive zone, just so much fun to watch because he sees so much and he's able to manipulate the coverage. He's just really good with the puck on his stick. It's fun to watch. He needs to put it all together in his own end. And I don't think he's going to be the guy that's laying people out or anything like that. But I think in order to, Lindy mentioned with Owen Power, he wants everything to happen quicker for him. He wants to see a little bit more urgency in his game, in his own end, getting the puck out and making those plays. But I think there's an element of that in front of the net too, like having a little bit more urgency, protecting your net a little bit better. And I
Tying
think
up guys, getting
tying
body
guys up,
position.
yeah,
Yeah.
using your frame to box people out. Again, doesn't need to be a huge hit.
You want to play
in the
off this, Matthew, when you're talking about Owen Power? John Chanel writes, I want Power to get a 3-game boarding suspension so the opposition at least has to pay attention to when he's on the ice. I know you kind of have some thoughts on, the physicality. You want to play off that at all?
Yeah, like I don't need him to do that. I mean, sure. I guess I'm not saying it would be he should do that, but it would sort of be a welcome surprise to see that type of edge in his game. I do just think he needs to understand how to use his body at this
Yeah.
level a lot better. And that he just needs to be able to box people out. He needs to be able to, you can be a really great defensive player at that size without ever getting a 3-game boarding suspension, without ever, quote unquote, making the other team know you're there. You can kill plays in a lot of different ways. You can't do it entirely without your body either, though. So I do think there is a gap that needs to be closed there. I try not to be, one of the, he's what, 21, 22 years old. I mean, he's still very young. The learning curve for a defenseman in the NHL, the things people were saying about Rasmus Dahlin 4 or 5 years ago, even 3 years ago, look absurd now, right? So I try to give him a little bit of grace in terms of the physicality and learning how to use it. It's also just clearly not his game. I don't think it's like the natural instinct that he has to be some sort of major ass kicker back there. He's so good offensively, so good with the puck on his stick that he really can tilt the ice when he's out there. the thought for me is like, can Lindy Ruff get some of the other stuff out of him too? And can some more structure and some better, physical play from some of the forwards, tracking back, and all that help him? We'll see. Huge, huge year coming up for him though, because age kind of goes out the window when you have an $8 million cap hit. I feel like you got to start to live up to that number a little bit.
Yeah, this is a big year for him. No doubt about it. I just think that, you're never going to make him something that he's not. We've talked about this before, but a little bit more, him realizing how big and strong he is to get a lot of what you just detailed accomplished on the ice, I think will go a long way for this team. Before we go back to the chat, I want to go back real quick to something that happened today. I just noticed that I wrote it down and I kind of skipped over it. John Gibson is going to be out 3 to 6 weeks. Appendectomy. And do you think the Sabres have to worry about protecting Reimer a little bit from that? I mean, if you look across the league, see, because here's the thing. I think Anaheim, they can lean into Lucas Dostal a little bit, but I think like Suhanek's hurt. Kelly Klang is not ready. Like if Gibson's out more towards the 6 weeks, I think they're probably going to have to look for some insurance in that, because I think their depth kind of falls off a cliff. Like they have like Oscar Dansk in camp, and they have Suhanek who's hurt, Klang, who I don't think is ready to like play X amount of games. I don't think he's ever seen an NHL shot in action. They have one other goalie, I think a younger guy that I think they have slated for AHL Coast League this year. Detroit's got 3. There's a logical situation there where Anaheim could look at, right? Because they got Alex Lyon, they got Talbot, Billy Husso, and a couple other goaltenders. I mean, it's not like the Sabres are the only ones. They could easily just say, yeah, we'll put Levi down. But then I got him already up getting his first shutout on December 15th. But do you think that the Sabres have to like guard against that?
Maybe. I think they can if they want.
I mean, $1 million James Reimer.
I'm not going to crush them if they keep 3 goalies, because when I was putting together the roster projection earlier this week at The Athletic, I didn't have somebody that I felt super strongly about for the 23rd spot. It's between, for me, Bryson and Lukáš Rusek, or maybe Yuri Kulik, but I think we both agree that he's probably better off if he's not in the lineup. And if he's not your 13th, if he's your 14th forward, you'd rather him be your first line AHL player and get off to that hot start that you talked about. Rusek, you're fine with that as a 14th forward at this point in his career. Like, he either needs to be that or he's 25 years old. So Bryson, a fine 8th defenseman, but if keeping that third goalie, protects him from getting poached, I think it might be worth doing for a little while. I wouldn't crush them for it, certainly. Reimer seems like he's kind of the mindset that he certainly wants to be in Buffalo. He hasn't played in the AHL in a long time.
Yeah.
Signed for $1 million. I don't know what type of assurances he was given, but he was not in that main practice group to start camp. He is with the team in Europe. It doesn't feel like he's of the mind frame that he's going to be playing in the AHL, but neither was Eric Comrie until he was down there, right? It just happens. But I do think the $1 million salary should help them, but it's not going to be a deterrent for a team like Anaheim. Anaheim's got all sorts of cap space.
Oh, I mentioned the $1 million because I think it puts him in play if they try to pass him through to Rochester.
Yeah, I don't think it's a big enough number to prevent.
It's not. No, that's what I mean. That's very affordable, I think, for what they need. And then, Anaheim could waive him, and the Sabres could end up getting him back. He could be passed around like a freshman year doobie. Like, who was that goalie last year that played for he kept bouncing back through Ottawa. I can't remember, Swedish goalie. I'm drawing a blank right now. But that's that's possible. I ultimately think that they're going to keep 3 to start the year. Just for some weird feeling, I just think that's how it's gonna
Well,
go.
in my head,
Largely because of
I
what you
keep
said.
thinking
Yeah.
Reimer is more important than Bryson or Rusek. Would you agree with that?
Um, yes.
Because you
Yes.
are an injury away from being down to Sandstrom if you don't have Reimer.
Yes.
And you are, it for all intents and purposes looks like Devin Levi is ready to take a step forward this year, but he's still young. He's still inexperienced in terms of how much, pro level action he's gotten. So I wouldn't say that you have two unproven goalies, but you have one guy who has one half of a season of really great work in Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen. You have Devin Levi, who has shown in a handful of games how good he can be, but otherwise has still been finding his footing, as you would expect a goalie of that age. Hence, Reimer's importance. He's not a star, but he's put up some decent numbers the last few years when he's been in decent situations. The San Jose year notwithstanding, but you didn't sign him for no reason, right? Pay him $1 million. I
I think they're
I
gonna
think
carry him.
I think I'd rather have him than Bryson. The more I think about it, or probably maybe Rusek is where you would. Well, you'd have to go. Would it be both of them?
You have more
Yeah, it would have
suitable
to be both.
forward replacements than you do defense replacements. Like if if say Samuelson gets hurt, and I think that it is Rusek. Honestly, you have more guys to tap into on the farm in the forward ranks than you do on D. Gets
Well, no,
really
it's
short.
both. It's both Bryson and Rusek who you can't keep.
Yeah.
You would have
I
13
think
forwards,
yeah.
7 defense. I'm thinking Gilbert's ahead of Bryson
That's why I threw
for
that up
me.
here. I wanted to make sure you address that. Yeah.
I have Gilbert ahead of Bryson because Gilbert brings something different than Bryson. Brings something different than a lot of guys, almost all the guys that they have on defense besides Clifton and maybe Samuelson, in that he is physical. He'll fight if you need him
He's got the
to.
size. He's just got the
Big.
sheer size and
Yeah.
reach. And, I comment a lot, like when we're watching games, I'll text you. I'll be like, look at the reach of the play. That's a play that guys that are 6'2", 6'4" can make, that a guy like Bryson can't, that a guy like Lane Hudson will not be able to make, by the way, in Montreal. There's a lot of those plays. Like the size matters. Like when Vegas was winning their cup, their defense, they were all, I think, 6'2" and above or something like that. Became a copycat league, but
well, and I look at Bryson, Cale Clegg, Ryan Johnson, and I see 3 left-handed defensemen who I think, all in all, like, I'm not worried if I drop off from Bryson to Clegg, or if I drop off from Clegg to Ryan Johnson. I don't love dropping off from Gilbert to one of those guys because of how different they play. The others, it feels like stylistically closer. And so they feel more interchangeable to me. Gilbert feels like the one that he's got to stay. I've thought that since they brought him in, and just seeing him a little bit, like that's a guy that's your 7th defenseman. But it's the other. I think they have good depth on defense. So yeah, you'd have to go 13 forward, 7 defense, 3 goalies if you kept Reimer, which means you're waiving Rusek, you're waiving either Bryson or Gilbert, whichever one you prefer. I would waive Bryson. And so then I think they would both pass through too, personally. Maybe, I don't know, Bryson passed through last year. I don't know what
because of
would
the
change.
salary, though. He had a big number last year. Doesn't have a big number
I
this
guess
year.
that's true. Flat cap, salary. Maybe somebody would grab him. That's a good point.
Potentially. I think the number does matter. Right. because he was like 1-8 last year or something like that.
I think he was making a lot of money. I don't know how he got that much money. That was before I was here, I think.
It's
But
a mystery.
that was a good deal. Good deal for him. Good deal for the agent. Rusek is unproven, so I feel like he could probably pass through. But I don't know. It's an interesting conversation because I think the Gibson news is the first bit of news that potentially
Makes
there
you
could
think
be
about
more
it.
of other goalies around the league who could, teams that could need a James Reimer to kind of just, plug in and play.
I just screwed up and unstarred some chats that I previously starred. So I don't know. I think I kind of messed this up there. My bad. Got a little itchy on the trigger finger here. Let me throw a couple more up here. We're an hour and 20 in. I knew it. We were going to just go. I knew it. Brian Cummings says, I'm still working out where to put each of Peterka, Cousins, and Quinn in the 20 to 30 goal continuum. I'm not counting on 20 from a 5'8" 18-year-old in the second year. I think he means 5'8" 18-year-old, but unless he did shrink. He's not counting on 20 from Dorf, an 18-year-old Dorf in his second year. I'm not probably there yet either on 20 for Benson. But yeah, it's kind of interesting though. He still gets me excited. Like, and I love to see Lindy acknowledging that. Like, he picked up on it like quickly as he should, right? He's an NHL head coach. He knows a smart, good, competitive hockey player, and he sees one. And that's out of the ordinary for Lindy. I think, like, he really had to dig deep and say, yeah, this kid's still a couple years off from his first legal beer, and he's like a legitimate. Like, he's really enjoying watching him. I thought that was something. That's a credit to the kid.
It's credit to the kid more than anything else. I mean, I think Zach Benson has done that to all of us, really, who have watched him since he got to Buffalo, that it's like you're looking for a reason for why the 18-year-old can't fit into the NHL, right? You're almost assuming that to be the case, especially when he was not, number 1, 2, or 3 overall pick. But it's everything Lindy's been talking about, and everything we've talked about with Zach Benson since he got here is just everything he does away from the puck. Like, he is, Kevin Adams uses that term, a winning hockey player, which they have not had, not something a lot of Sabres can say over the last decade or so, but this guy is one of those players that you need, right? And for somebody like Lindy who's coming in trying to put in some new systems or some new ways of doing things, some new habits, some new quote unquote non-negotiables, for him to say he hasn't had to coach Zach Benson a lot, I think says a lot about who Zach Benson is. It says a little something about Lindy Ruff as a coach too. This idea that he's some old school, stuck in the past. Like, I think he has changed a lot.
Yep.
And he has evolved a lot. And this is part of it, recognizing he's got a 19-year-old that can help him win and is doing a lot of the things that he wants other guys to do. And so he's going to be in.
I love this. Benson's Ed Kron writes, Benson reminds me of Danny Gear. Kind of love that. Danny Gear was like piss and vinegar, scored 56 one year. Had a lot of fire. Yeah, that's a good, I like that. That's a throwback, Ed, too. I love that. But the reason also it reminded me, Sabres have their mural.
That's right. We forgot.
Are they and Danny Gear's on the mural. I think they did a pretty good job of that. I looked at the roster today. I got a little more familiar with who's on the mural. There was names that I was looking for.
27 guys on there. So
yeah, it's the roster they're taking to Europe, right?
Yeah, that's
27.
They wish that would be.
Yeah, there's a lot. I know there's a lot of for a team that's never won a championship. They found a lot of guys. But everyone that I was looking for was on there. Mike Ramsey had to be on there. You know what I mean? Pekka. Like some of the like Ramsey to me is an obvious one. Ramsey's jersey should be hanging. His numbers should be hanging in the rafters. But Pekka, I think, was like a less obvious one. I just wanted to make sure they got the important ones. There's the easy ones, right? Was there any that you think they missed?
Just laughing at the chat. These chatters.
There's one name that I missed. There's one name that they missed, and he wasn't a player, and it's not RJ actually. I was looking for Scotty Bowman to see if they'd throw him up there, and they
That would have
didn't
been
do that.
good.
Yeah.
I'm more curious. We were talking earlier. If you were to do wrong answers only, who did they miss? Who the chat would say? You know, or that Cody Eakin, should he be up there? Because man, you could put together a cast of characters with wrong answers only up there.
Billy Lano. Could you
Billy
imagine
Lano.
walking to the arena and see Billy Lano's face on that walkway?
Robin Lehner. I mean, somebody did the Photoshop with all the guys that have won the cup elsewhere, which you could fill a mural with that. But no, I think it did need a pop of color too. I think it's a nice addition to the front of the arena. Well, I haven't seen it.
This is a good one. Bob Corkum. Kevin says Bob Corkum. That's a good one.
I figured the chat would.
This is good. Who wore John Scott's helmet in the penalty box and put that up there? That was Corey Conacher. Steve, 13th Legion. That was a great one. So that's before your time, Matthew. Yeah, I think you were still in college. Corey Conacher. Yeah, Aaron Dell was a good one. Yeah, Aaron Dell, actually, they waived him from his PTO and he signed today with the Barracuda. Still playing. He's the new Alex Stalock, apparently.
Now, this was before my time, but Ehrhoff wasn't necessarily a bad player in Buffalo, right? It was just the contract people didn't like.
Yeah. I think it was like a 10-year Patrick Berglund. Yeah, you got the damn chat going. How fast is Jordan Greenway and Bob Corkum? Steve 13th Legion writes. He's about a third of Bob Corkum.
See, this is the mural I want to see. We've got Buffalo legend Taylor Hall, Grigorenko.
I love Dave Snuggerud, Stephen Cantor. He was a supplemental draft pick, I believe.
Dave
Snuggerud.
I talked to Dave Snuggerud for a story last year. I'm almost positive.
You did.
What did I talk to him about? Why can't I remember?
I can't remember, but you did. I know you talked to Snuggerud.
That's
a good way to end this podcast, though.
Yeah, let us know in the comments of of this video, wrong answers only, who the Sabres should have put on the mural. We've got some great answers here in the chat, but throw it in the comments of the YouTube video when this posts, because we could really get it cooking. I feel like we're just scratching the surface here.
Okay, and before we go, because I know like this is not a fun discussion for those that are going to be listening on audio and their drive, if they are driving very far, an hour in. I agree with this, actually. McGizzy writes, I thought Afinogenov was a little bit of an odd pick. So do I. But I've never been a huge Max Afinogenov fan. I know fans loved him every time he got the puck, and he was skating around all fast like a balloon running out of air, just going all around, and like his brain could never match up with how fast his feet were moving. I never really appreciated Afinogenov. I didn't like him. I know he scored some big clutch goals in playoffs, but I don't know. I agree with that comment, actually. So good call.
I talked to Dave Snuggerud for a John Tortorella story at The Athletic from when John Tortorella was with the Sabres. His early days as an Amerks and Sabres coach, and Snuggerud was a rookie. And John Tortorella was a rookie coach at the time. But yeah, Snuggerud, great guy. His kid is a big-time prospect for the Blues. So
Jimmy, and then Luke, I think, was his nephew, was also a draft pick. Went to, I think, Nebraska, Omaha. We're doing Stump the Schwab now. This is how we got to get out of here. Hey, everyone in the chat, thank you. You know what? I don't even think that we pounded this out on X tonight. So we got a pretty good turnout in the chat by just going on YouTube. That's something.
These are our people.
These are our people. That's right. If you could like this video, if you
Hey,
haven't already on
Purchase
your way
says,
out, I would appreciate that.
your friend Joe DiBiase is a big Maxim Affinaganoff fan.
Is he? Okay.
So
Don't tell that to
just so
Joe
you know.
DiBiase. Joe DiBiase. I should text Joe DiBiase and tell him that I'm not going to go there. I'm not going to go there.
That's for next show.
I heard Joe DiBiase talking about prospects on his podcast that he does, and I was losing my mind. That's all I'm going to say.
He was talking about another Russian. Max Affinaganoff's Russian, right?
Yeah. All right. Way to derail me on the way out. If you could please like this video on your way out, I appreciate everyone for hopping in tonight. For Matthew Fairburn from The Athletic, for the production crew in the truck outside, ready to watch the Sabres at 2:30 Eastern time tomorrow play Red Bull Munich. I'm Kris Baker. Thanks for hopping in, everyone. We'll see you again next time. Maybe Matt will be on location at an exotic location next time we get together.
Probably.
We'll see you then. Tune back in to find out where Matt is. Have a good night.